sets, right? But the performance of those models fails drastically on exposure to out of distribution data sets or adversarial data set, right? Uh, and so now this is a problem. Like you can easily fool a model and they don't solve a problem on a different data set or on a different distribution, right? Now to solve this problem, there are two ways. You can develop better models, like come up with new architectures and all those things. And on the other hand, you can think about creating high quality data. So by data, I don't mean quantity. I don't mean data augmentation that you add more data into it, like the conventional deep models, so you add more data, but I talk about high quality data, less data, but high quality data. So my argument, like our thought process in this line of work is, since all these models are data-driven models, it's data which actually leads or misleads the model. We should think about how to create high-quality data to actually help the model not overfit and generalize to several different tasks. So this is data-centric work. Now, this talk overview, I will talk about DQI. What is DQI? Then why DQI? We have so many other things like why we need a DQI. And then I'll talk about the process, which the way we develop this DQI, like how do we find these parameters? The DQI consists of several parameters. Then we'll compare with AFLIGHT. So AFLIGHT is a ICML 2020 recent work where they actually propose adversarial filtering method to remove biases. And with that, they saw that by removing biases adversarially, they help the model in generalizing to out of distribution tasks. So we'll compare that, and then we'll go to this several applications from DQI. Uh, like we have this Bhaida, which actually helps us to create a high quality data set by providing feedback in the crowdsourcing process. Then we have this Autofix and CAM, and we have this active learning setup, and finally we have this pruning algorithm. So this pruning algorithm, as I said in the beginning of the talk, our goal is you don't need a lot of data to do a task. With very less data but high quality data, you can learn the task better. I mean, actually we saw in the pruning algorithm, 1% of SNL data is enough to replicate the IID and almost similar OOD performances of rote. Now, let's start. Okay. So yeah, so DQI stands for Data Quality Index. Okay, now this quality is popular in other domains. We have this electrical power quality index in electrical engineering. We have this water quality index, air pollution quality index, or food quality, and several others. Uh, yeah, and soil quality and all those things, right? But we don't have something like that in NLP or in general machine learning, right? So AI is dominated by data-driven models. So data leads and misleads the model. So we should have a quality index for NLP and vision and speech and other tasks that can actually tell what is the quality of a chunk of data. Now, why this is important at this point of time? If because of this thing called spurious bias. The spurious bias stands for this unintended correlation between input and output. So this is a very interesting paper by Sachin Gurrangan and the group, and so they saw that uh, these models are actually exploiting to spurious bias instead of learning generalizable features. For example, in the image here, you can see that the word "not" is giving away the label contradiction. So the model is ignoring everything else, and whenever you see the word "not," it says contradiction. Similarly, there are other kinds of spurious biases, which actually prevents the model from generalizing to several different tasks. Now, so that's why some kind of now that's why data quality is important. And our idea is, like in other domains, we have this power, water, and soil. Can we develop something like that for NLP and later in general for machine learning, so that we can understand what are the parameters that affect data quality? And this can have several different applications. Like one application is you can you can actually provide a feedback to the crowdsourcing process by adding constraint, so that crowd worker will create high quality data set. Now, what does the data quality index look like? So if you see here, it's a basically equation, right? You see the water quality index, it's an equation. RV equal to A plus BI plus CI square plus DIQ. Similarly, for power quality index, you have a bunch of equations. You have some parameters, like in case of power, you have this voltage, current, and several other parameters. So you find the parameters and then you try to make a formula out of it. That's how the index works in other domains. Now, I will tell like how we mimic that process to come up with such a formula. I'll explain that, how to do that. Yeah, so before that, you must be thinking like we have several other, just a little bit of related works. We have recently several different works to um, basically handle bias. The first one is on the top left in this image here. A-Flight, that's adversarial filtering. This is basically dataset pruning. What they do is, so they prune the dataset. So in their paper, they show that by pruning the dataset to 15% of the original dataset, so basically they delete 85% of the data around that. And with that, they show that the model generalized better to out of distribution tasks. That is first approach, the dataset pruning. The second approach is, you see here is stopping model from exploiting biases. This is a model-based approach. So what they do is they first identify some of the biases, then they train a bias-only model, and then what they do is they create an ensemble. They train another model by training an ensemble, and the goal is, since the bias-only model has the idea of all the different kind of biases, now the other model in the ensemble will not learn the biases and it will learn some better features. So that's how they do that type of work. And then the third one is they have a feedback, the recent work adversarial NLI, where actually they have human in the loop and humans create harder samples so that can actually fool the model. That's why they have this adversarial NLI. And finally, we have this recent work on contrast set, where actually, and contrast set and counterfactual data augmentation, where they basically ask the dataset creators to change the inputs in such a way to create change the inputs in the surrounding, so that to prevent bias, to prevent model from learning the specific type of pattern or specific type of bias. Now these are the four recent works, but there are several limitations this work says. So total they have 7 limitations in total. For example, the first one is, so the resources invested in creating the initial bias data get wasted, because what A-Flight does is A-Flight deletes it post creation. So what they did is, like, we have 550K examples in SNLI, and they deleted from 550K to around 92K or something like that. So, but that's post creation, right? So the deleted. So deletion actually is because if you delete the amount of resources and time spent in creating got wasted, that's a problem. The second one is a dataset. You're not giving a feedback to a dataset creator, right? So because it's a black box approach, either you accept it or delete it, right? So a dataset creator is not prevented from creating bias data in future data creation process. Like, it's not, he or she is not educated, like what exactly creates a bias and what exactly don't create a bias. Okay, so in this talk, bias means spurious bias. So there are two kinds of bias: inductive bias and spurious bias. So inductive bias, which favors the model, but I am focusing on the spurious bias, which is the unintended type of bias. The third problem is, there are several important aspects of bias, like the dependence of bias on training certain test set. Like, so there's a data leakage between uh, the training set and test set. So there's a paper on that. We need to talk about splits, so that standard splits, the results of standard splits don't replicate on random splits, right? So that aspect is not considered. And several set of additional biases has been created as a byproduct. And of course, when you involve humans have their own set of bias, right? So that you cannot control those biases. And also the time complexity of the process is very high, because the involvement of training at each iteration, and they are specific to model and task. And there is too much effort required on the part of crowd worker, authors, and experts without providing a suitable and illustrative feedback channel. So you have to, so like they have to fool the model, or they have to create this new kind of data set, but there is no proper feedback loop going on. Apart just from you're just getting one feedback that the data we are creating is able, the model is able to answer it or not. That's the only feedback you're getting. Apart from that, you're not able to really get any feedback from that. We try to address these problems using our DQI. Now, so as I said, DQI will be like a mathematical formula of quality of several different variables, right? Now, how do we find that formula? So for that, the best way is to mimic what other people have done in other domains, right? So like, for example, in water quality index, quality is calculated in terms of observables by finding how they affect us. Like from this article, if you see that they actually first find out the list of parameters and then concentration trend in a sample to a single value based on the suitability for various purposes like drinking, irrigation, and fishing, and all those things. Now we are trying to mimic them. So what we do is we look for what are the parameters.
Anup, I have a question.
Sure.
So data quality index you are saying, but like for example, you gave an analogy about water quality, electrical quality, but data come from various sources. Like you cannot say like data is about just like it depend on the task, it depend on the source domain where it comes. So how do you accommodate that on like a data quality index?
Yeah.
Are these parameters or are these like each of these things has a different quality kind of incentive?
Yeah. So what we do is, that's what I was going to explain next. So we identify some basic text properties, which is common across all these different things, right? So all these text have some properties like vocabulary, sentence similarity, and so basic textual. I'll go over that. So when I go to that, you'll know. So for that, exactly the question you have asked, right? So how to accommodate all these different tasks for that? And then you have to find out these parameters, right? So basically in power, we have these parameters like say current or voltage, which actually impacts the data quality, right? So we are here able to find out what is the textual property, what is the texture, the linguistic property or something like that, that actually affects the data quality. You have to find that. And that should be generic across tasks. So what we do is, to answer your question, what we do is first, we actually identify 7 properties of text that cover various possible interactions in a document or in NLP. Like so if you see, starting from, we have the simple thing is word. The green boxes are word. We have word-to-word interaction. Then we have phrases, bigram, trigrams, and all those things. We have phrase level interaction. Then we have sentence level interaction, and then we have this that is unsupervised. Then you add labels. So how they interact with labels, and then we have this splits, train split and test split. So we go from lower hierarchy to hierarchies, and we look for all different. So we look for 7 properties. We find 7 such properties that can explain various kinds of interactions that can happen in an NLP dataset. Now, what are the 7 properties? These are 7 properties. We look for these 7 properties like vocabulary, intersample n-gram frequency in relation. So n-gram is bigram, trigram, and all. Intersample semantic textual similarity, the STS, this is the sentence level. Word similarity, intersample STS. Now the label comes in, n-gram frequency for label, and then the split comes in. So to answer your question, like this is not specific to a task, right? This is basic linguistic properties that's there in every NLP dataset, right? So we look for those properties, and there are some miscellaneous also. But then what we do is we have to find the parameters, right? Just knowing the properties is not enough. We have to know what is the attribute of the property is actually helping or not helping the model in generalizing or in learning the spurious bias. So we actually survey a lot of papers in our work, and we shortlist something like 68 parameters, and we categorize them into these 7 categories. That, for example, vocabulary magnitude, vocabulary across pause tags, maximal word distance. So there are several different kinds of parameters we identified from surveys. So what kind of survey we look for? The survey we look for is So people have studied this and said like people have mentioned in the papers that like you saw in the Sachin Gururangan's paper, they have said that the distribution is skewed towards one word. The knot is getting attached to contradiction that creates bias, right? So that is one kind of input we got from survey, like the distribution of words across labels. If one word is skewed towards one label, that means it's a bias. We want it to be equally distributed, so we want to be balanced across all different labels. Similarly, people have said about several other things, like if the sentence similarity, so the premise and hypothesis similarity, so if the hypothesis is a subset of premise, right? So it's most often it's going to be entailment. And that's how actually crowd workers find it easy to do that. So, I mean, that's another kind of bias. So sentence similarity or word overlap between premise and hypothesis for NLI can be a feature. So we actually cover a lot of different tasks, NLI to question answering, reading comprehension, and text summarization, all different tasks. We read a lot of papers where people have said what actually helps and what don't actually help, and try to summarize in terms of these parameters. So we could actually find out around 68 parameters on these 7 or 8 properties. Now, so based on the survey result, we shortlist these parameters. So what we do is basically, so the steps we follow is, as I said, we basically find out 7 properties. Like I said, the first step is to find out the 7 properties. Then we look for these leads, like isolating potential leads. So we find out, I think, 100 something such leads. But in those leads, we look for those leads which is not specific to one task, which can be generalizable across tasks. And that way we filter out certain kinds of leads. This is what we have done so far. And then what we do is we just express that in terms of a math formula. We don't know how it's actually going to react right at this point, but what we have done till now is we got the survey. From that, whatever you observe, if somebody says the distribution should not be skewed towards one particular label, so we just express in a mathematical formula that the variance of the distribution should be low. Or somebody says vocabulary should be high, then we express that as the vocabulary. We express the vocabulary magnitude by normalizing the number of vocabulary by the size of data set as one feature. So basically, you can say empirical DQI consists of several different features. So this math formulas based on their observations, we have some 133 components, so basically 21 broad components we got this math formulas. Now, but okay, we got this from survey, but how do we know like they are actually helping or not helping? But we got it, but how they combiningly affect? So for that, what we do is we evaluate with respect to AFLite. So AFLite, as I said, is a adversarial filtering model. That actually, what it does, to summarize in one line, is they use linear model to find out the spurious biases. So if the intuition is simple that if a model, if you are, so they provide the robot embedding, so they provide high level features, and if 2 features are linearly correlated using a simple model like say logistic regression or SPM, it's most likely to be biased. And so that's why they iteratively, in a greedy algorithm, they iteratively prune it, and that's how they show that by removing the bias, they're able to help model in generalizing better. So basically, but the thing is, they depend on a linear model to find out the bias. Right? So we want to see the type of parameters we find out. How do they stand with respect to AFLite? So we do that comparison, and if you see, we see that we try across 4 data sets: SNLI, MNLI, Squad, and Story Close. So what we see here is the green one is okay. DQI and AFLite are on the same page. Like if it says high quality, AFLite also says high quality. But if you see the red one, that means DQI says this type of biases should have been removed, but AFLite, I mean, didn't remove it. So like that. So there is a conflict in the red spaces, and there is agreement in the green spaces. So later on, you analyze and find out that several different kinds of biases we consider are, I mean, that AFLite is not considering, and like that. So, but then still, we don't have a gold level, right? We don't have a gold level to compare. We cannot say that, I mean, DQI is better than AF, something like that. We cannot say that because we don't have a gold level of what data is actually biased, what data is not actually biased. So for that, we thought, okay, let's use it for several different kind of applications, and let's and then try to verify like if our formulas make sense to create a high quality data set. So the first application is, as you see, is this called VIDA. And if you remember, when I explained the related works, I mentioned that one of the problem is there is no proper feedback. Crowdsourced workers who are creating data set, they don't get a feedback like the quantity, they don't get a feedback whether the sample they are creating is eventually going to be rejected or accepted. So we do that. We propose that mechanism. So what we do is we have an index right now. So we put DQI in the loop. So we recreate actually, we rename SNLI in this process. So what we do is, so SNLI consists of image caption, and you have a premise and a hypothesis. You have to write the hypothesis 1, hypothesis 2, hypothesis 3 for different kinds of labels. So when somebody writes an example, what we do is we check with respect to our DQI formula, and if it is accepted, we show a green symbol. It's a traffic signal terminology. So if it is acceptable quality, it's green. If it's not acceptable, it's red, and if it is in between, it's orange. So that's how we provide a feedback to the user that the exam.
I have a question. So how do you calculate the quality without having the data at first hand? Like, because the DQI itself will depend on the data to calculate. So how do you basically have anything feedback without having?
Yeah. So what will happen is initially you'll get a lot of greens because you don't have any data, and as you create more and more data, the distribution will get distribution, and now you are making the distribution skewed. You'll get a red signal. So yeah, like that. So basically, what we do is when crowd workers they create data in phases, right? So we collect data and keep it, store it, and then use that. Okay, this much data has been already created. For example, suppose 10,000 data has been already created, and you are creating the 10,001 sample. And now how the 10,001 sample is going to affect the quality of the 10,000 samples? Is it making the distribution more skewed, or how it is making? So based on that, we give the feedback. But yeah, initially we have nothing, so initially everything will be great.
Okay, and one more question, like many of the things which you suggested, like the index, like sentence similarity and all, how do you calculate that? Because there is not like, do you calculate? Obviously, I don't think so. You use human, you use some pre-trained models to calculate.
Yeah, so we use BERT STS for that. So we use species, semantic textual similarity. So we have this glue task that Anvi's BERT is trained on STSB, and that one.
Yeah, so my point is like then you are also somewhat using a model to evaluate your quality index, not earlier method. There is some involvement of model, maybe not directly for the task and rejecting a sample something, but something in indirectly on getting a score around the
sample. To get the features we need models. Specifically for this semantic textual similarity, we definitely need that. Because word overlap doesn't give a proper indication, or even word similarity. So you need that sentence like. Now, okay, so initially when we actually did a user study on this, we find out that crowd workers are actually sometimes getting annoyed because you are creating examples, it's showing red, red, red. I mean, what do? You will just, you might get frustrated. What should I do? So that's why, based on that feedback from the case study, we introduced something called AutoFix. So what is AutoFix does is, it's a recommender system. So if you're getting red, you can click on the AutoFix, and AutoFix might provide a suggestion for you. And I'll talk about it, how AutoFix works. So basically the idea is similar to TextFooler. So the recent paper on each BERT really reverts the TextFooler model that adversarially attacks BERT. Use that similar idea to design AutoFix. I'll come to that in detail. But yeah, so then now with the AutoFix feedback, it becomes relatively easier for the crowd worker to convert the red signal to green. We did a user study on that. Now, the second thing is education part. Like we just don't want to, again, we don't want to just want to give red, green, and orange, right? We also want to show that why the example they are creating is affecting the overall data quality. So for that, we have we have a visualization platform. We have several different visualizations where we actually show the distribution and training and testing split and all the different kinds of properties, and educate the crowd worker that, you know what, that's why you're getting a red. And initially we didn't expose it. So we did a user study and some people didn't like it because it's too much for them. So then we decided, okay, instead of providing it to the crowd worker, we have something like analyst. So the analyst is the person, the admin actually right now, who accepts or rejects data set, right? So instead of just looking, instead of just looking at a score in terms of these features, like instead of looking at data quality index, we thought we'll provide analyst more freedom. So in terms of this visualization, all those things, so that analyst can see how exactly, and then you can actually come up with a proper trend, event, test split, and all those things. So, and yeah, so this is for the education purpose, the visualization. And analyst, on the other hand, there are two features we're providing to the analyst. The first one is the visualization. The second one is adversarial sample generation. So what is that is, so in a user study, we saw that even though you provide them red signal and provide them autofix, some people might not use it, right? They eventually, they can submit the red, the sample ignoring everything else. So in our experiment, we find out there are a lot of samples which have red flags, right? So what to do with that? Like, I mean, you can reject it, but we thought, you know, why not we give it one more try? So analyst has all these bad quality samples, the red samples. So we thought maybe we can convert this to an adversarial sample, so that so we'll change certain words in the bad quality data, and we'll we'll use this adversarial attack method, so the text tool basically, to convert it to an adversarial sample. And so this way we can say repairing the work. So the data set which is red, we can turn to green automatically. But not only that, we also try to improve the model robustness, because there are two different aspects, right? Generalization and robustness. The biases talk about generalization, but robustness is how it is robust against this adversarial attacks and all those things. So we thought, now analysts, there is no time constraint, right? So analysts can process, there is no computational border, because in crowd worker you have to give an online feedback very quickly, so it has to be lightweight. But analysts has a lot of time. So we thought, why can't you use a something like Textfuller to convert the sample adversarially? That can help in both aspects. One is including increasing the quality, first the generalization, and the second is increasing robustness, because you involve the model and you ensure that the sample is the adversarial sample. So we'll talk to about that. So
which platform do you use for deploying all this?
Yeah, Textfuller. I'll come to that.
Okay.
So yeah, the VIDA is basically, as you see, we have this visualization platform where you have this different kinds of visualizations, and then we have this data creation paradigm, so that we can all this autofix and all those things. Now, how do we show the efficacy apart from the user study? In user study, we saw two kinds of utilities. One is that we saw that without all this, normally if crowd workers create data set, how much of the data set they create, I mean, how much of the data set they create ultimately get accepted? Like say the acceptance ratio is say around 60%, right? Now with all these things, is it helping the crowd worker to create data set? I mean, with provide more accuracy in more acceptance rate basically. So we did that analysis. The second analysis is the proving efficacy analysis is basically we collected some samples from various papers, which says like the Sachin Gururangan paper and other papers, which says these are the samples which is bad because I mean, for example, the word not is attached to contradiction and all these things, right? Now, if our formulation is correct, it should show red to those samples, right? Those bias samples, and it should say green to the samples which don't contain the bias. So we saw the efficacy of it by actually testing all these different kinds of examples, and so that our model gives red signal when there's a biased example that come up. Now, yeah, so this is more about the visualization aspect, like how do we visualize and all those things. So we have a we are going to open source it. So basically, you can actually see how different kinds of textual properties can produce different kinds of bias. But yeah, now to answer Vivek your question, this AutoFix and CAM, right? So this is what I said. We have this AutoFix to assist crowd worker with sample modification, and then we have this adversarial data creation using TextPooler to improve dataset robustness and generalization. Now I have this algorithm. Now what we do in AutoFix is we have this original premise. We find out the words which are important, and then we found the synonym of word using the cosine similarity matrix. We pick the top n synonyms. We do some pre-processing, and then we replace the synonyms. And we have a condition here. We check that by replacing the synonym, the semantic textual similarity of the sentence should not change. Otherwise, if you change the meaning, it doesn't make sense, right? So this is how we provide, and this is basically inspired from TextPooler. I mean, they have a similar, so we get the idea from there. And using that to provide suggestion. But the second part which we are interested in is like the adversarial dataset creation, right? So this is what we do. So what we do is to show the efficacy. So what we do is in the SNI data, we find out what are the bad split, what are the good split, what are the bad samples which should be rejected, what are the good splits that should be retained, right? And the good split we keep it as it is. Now the bad split we actually input those to TextPooler and we convert them to adversarial samples. Like, so we change certain parts of the, like as I said, TextPooler changes certain parts of the words. So basically how TextPooler works is, yeah, I have to go back. Yeah. So how TextPooler works is similar to this. So they first find out from a sentence, which are the important words. So how do they find important words is if you remove one word, or if you remove a word from the sentences, how much is the model performance is changing. So based on that, they rank and they find out if you remove that word, if the model performance changes the maximum, that is the most important word. And like that, they rank it. And then after the ranking based on importance, they actually find synonyms of each of the words, and then they actually replace the synonyms and ensure that the semantic textual similarity of the sentence don't change. So we use the same thing here, the bad sample, which is supposed to be rejected by the using our data quality index or AFSI. We actually convert them, we input it to TextPooler, and to convert it into a robust example. And since it's an adversarial example, we have to revert to the original level, because adversarial example is something where the model gets fooled, right? Model predicts the wrong level. So we revert to the original level and we basically do data augmentation. We have the good data that comes as it is. Bad data, after doing adversarial transformation, we augment with the good data, and then we train again, give it to the BERT and Robota. Now, if you see, our intuition behind this was to find out how generalization and robustness are related. Like if I convert bad splits to adversarial samples, will it help generalize better? We don't observe a clear-cut pattern here. So if you see here, what we do is we change number of adversaries in batches, and we see that, and we test with different kinds of out of distribution. For example, so we train all this on SNLI, and testing happens on out of distributed dataset like stress test, and then we have this adversarial NLI, and we have this HANS and NLI diagnostic. So we observe that by providing the by creating adversarial samples, it helps in certain cases. For example, test with adversaries, it helps, and stress test, it helps a bit, but it doesn't help in other adversarial NLI or HANS or NLI diagnostic. This is for BERT. For Robota, we don't see actually a increase at all. And why it is lesser in number? Why don't have batches? Because I mean, Robota is a much more robust model, so it's difficult to create hardware cell samples. So basically, with this experiment, we wanted to see that if adversarial transformation can help us generalize better, but we don't see any conclusive evidence that it really helps. It helps in some time, it doesn't help in other time. Now, another interesting angle is we recently pursued is active learning, where people are talking about this dynamic benchmarking and all those things, where because benchmarks saturate quickly, so you want to create multiple hierarchies of benchmarks, like adversarial like creates level 1, level 2, level 3, right? So different based on the hardness. So they use human in the loop, so where humans create harder samples. Our intuition was, since you have a metric right now, active learning, can you use that metric to create harder samples? So what we do here is, if you look at the diagram, so we have this, we have several different kinds of hyperparameters in DQI, right? Like, for example, how much of the sentence similarity you allow between premise and hypothesis, or how much of the variance of the distribution you allow. All these are hyperparameters, right? You can make it more strict or not depending on application. So what we do is, in a loop, what we do is we control these hyperparameters. Like we allow, so I mean, sometimes you get lenient and we say, okay, you can have higher I mean, you can allow a little bit of spurious bias. So that will create it comparatively low quality, or say comparatively easier data set. But then we can be very hard. You can say, okay, now our thresholds are very high, and that creates a harder sample. So these are some of the samples to show how, some simple example, how we actually do that is, if you see here, premise and hypothesis. So this is the original premise and original hypothesis. So this STC stands for suggested token change. Like as you said, if one kind of bias is, if hypothesis is very similar to premise, it's a bias. So what we want to do is we change some tokens in the hypothesis. So, and we have two, and we create in hierarchies. For example, if you see the half STC hypothesis, we just change 3 words of the original hypothesis. But in the full STC hypothesis, we change 7 words of it. So make it more different. So that it cannot just rely on the previous biases that, okay, hypothesis has to be very similar to the premise to get an entailment, right? Similarly, yeah, so this is one feature, just using the word overlap for illustration purpose. I wanted to show you how we can actually control this, and with that we can have different hierarchies of data set. Like here we have 2 hierarchy of data set. And similarly, we have these other parameters, we control that, and we create different hierarchies of data set. And we saw across models that it becomes harder and harder if you create the thresholds very high. Now, the summary so far has been, we talk about this analysis of bias, where we talk about the survey. We did survey a lot of works, and we find out what are the parameters which affect, which don't affect, put them in 7 properties. Then we try to come up with a formula, data quality index formula based on the survey. And then we have construct a new user interface where we provide online feedback of green and red, and so that our model helps crowd workers in creating samples efficiently. And then we have this automated tools like the autofix or the text ruler, where we try to show that, like, how can you assist user in case somebody is stuck with the red signal for a long time. And then the first one is generating dynamic benchmarking with active learning using DQ and the loop by providing higher and higher threshold. Now, yeah, so in the beginning of the talk, I talked about this data versus model, right? Like, do we invest more on creating efficient architectures now with this transformer, something else will come, and we have all the different kinds of models, or should we focus on creating high quality data? Now, in this, so to show that, so our argument is data, we take the data side of it. So if you see here, what we do is we prune the data set from 550K, SNLize 550K, to around 1 to 2%. So like you see, it is 5,000 to 15,000. 15,000 around 2.7%, like that. With this much data set, so the IID performance with 550K is 89.6 from Toyota. Now with just 2% data or even lesser than that, you're able to get almost similar accuracy. You get 88.95, it's pretty close to 89.64. And the out of distribution accuracies are also similar. So we use, yeah, so this is an ongoing work. We are still experimenting with how different ways we can use DQI and A-Flight and several other different tools we have to prune data set, and so that, deep learning always don't require a lot of data. Like you can do the same task with a lesser number data set, and ultimately the goal is to help creating high quality data samples so that you can learn a task quickly with some finite number of samples. Because so the intuition behind this is now we have these pre-trained language models, right? Which have been already trained on lot of millions of data, right? So they already have this linguistic knowledge. So you don't have to teach them from scratch, unlike previously you have to do that. We just have to fine tune it on a specific task. So for example, for example, BERT already has been trained on mass language modeling and next sentence prediction. So it knows what the next sentence is, right? Now for training it on NLI task, we have to show what exactly entailment, contradiction, and neutral mean. We don't have to learn, we don't have to teach everything from scratch. So for that, we might not have to create a lot of data set. This is important because lots of resources and time are being spent on creating resources. It takes a lot of money and time to do that. And then people develop models and try to dominate leaderboard with that. But we wanted to show, and this also affects environment, like this sustainability and all those things comes up. There's a sustainability workshop on that. And yeah, so this actually we accepted to sustainability. This big experiment, a small part of it, we send it to that workshop. And then we have this now, computation provides an upper hand. If you have a lot of computation, it helps you to do a task better. So from all this different aspect, we wanted to, our approach is the data angle. We wanted to show that you don't need to create all these kinds of big data sets. Yeah. That's all.
I have a question.
Sure.
The last slide, so you are saying like you don't need a large data set for fine tuning. However, we need good test sets and validation sets, which are hard and mostly preferably human created with or adversely created kind of thing.
Yeah.
But for the training part of this, you are saying we don't maybe not need so much data. But my point is like this 15,000. How do you selected those 15 or 1% of the data by using like this? Basically you prune from all of the samples which are already been created, and then you put out the best part of it, or you basically selected or took out the best of it according to DQI or some other way.
Yeah.
But the point is like how will you ensure that in the first hand like this, if you just need 1 or 2%, like 15K for example, instead of 550K, will be coming with the same quality as these 15K, because these are selective sample out of the 550.
Correct. That's a great question. Yeah, that's a challenge. We are just showing that we don't need that, but then yeah, we have
how
to.
How to do that is yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's you are right. Actually, we don't have. We just show that we don't need all this data set, but then we have to backtrack it and have to show that like I said initially, we use DQI in the loop, and you create 15,000 samples, you eventually get a very good data set. So basically, what you're saying is, I understand that like you, this is a post creation operation, right? Somebody is created it,
Yes.
you create it, right? That effort still stays there, right? I mean,
yes. All the things which you stated in the beginning, like why we don't want to go for post fixing, are still problematic here also.
Yeah. So we are actually, so the Bhaida model I showed you, we're putting DQ in the metric and providing feedback to a crowd worker. And with that, actually right now we are conducting a experiment right now, just study where actually we're trying to mimic the exact setting of SNLI. And if you ask them with all this red and green flag and autofit and all those things, if you ask them to create 15,000 examples like that, right? Where does it stand? How will it help and all? That will be a perfect evaluation for the,
So I have one more question. The reason I don't know. Like the reason why crowd don't give good samples is because there is money insensitive, time sensitive money associated with it. So people want to do their task as quickly as possible to optimize their time and earn money. And so, and then you are saying, okay, I will give you feedback about things, which can be at multiple levels. So as first is you can give the flag, then you can give some visualization. How do you think like the crowd will accept that? Because as you said, one point was like you also get red flags despite being showing people the red flags. So
Yeah,
how do you basically,
yeah,
yeah, these are not expert. I agree. Like if an expert is doing this and you provided this example, they may take time to fix it and move on to the next.
yeah. I mean, initial experiments, the same thing. Like people ignored it completely, and then we said you have to, and then they used it, but then it's red and red for a long time. They just gave it up. We don't want to create data set. It's fine.
Yeah, so you have to somehow trade off between like, okay, because you cannot reject also. Like I have worked on crowdsourced pattern and platforms and all. Like if you want to create your data, you cannot have a task done and then you say, okay, I don't expect this task because of this is
Yeah,
not of good quality. So
yeah.
how like those
No,
problem
but
would be a challenge.
if you
Yeah,
don't post, if you provide feedback post creation, that's bad, right? Because somebody thought my data is accepted and now you are telling it's not accepted, it's bad. But if you
yeah,
don't accept there only, you say that, you know what, I think it's red, it might get, you show a warning to them, it's already red flag, it might get rejected. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is, you are right. I mean, but what can we do? Like people are not, people ignored it. Like that's the,
Okay,
uh,
yeah, I have another question. The good part of the study, the last one at least, as a comment kind of thing, like which I feel is like maybe you don't like you. There is one option where you create 550K examples, and you spend like around, for example, 10K, or I don't know, 10K is very less, 100K on that. And there is other option like you by crowdsourcing like 200, 300 workers. And there's another options, you say you create 15K by 50K, but you take expert of like, obviously in expert you have to pay maybe 5 times or six
yeah,
times and then with the platform you can create a high quality. So I think there the difference could be made, like if but getting those expert is also a little bit
yeah. I mean,
problematic. Even a sample of 1% of the crowdsource as expert is
yeah,
harder
it
to
will
get. So
too
this
much.
is another problematic, but I think this is a parallel way of creating data where you ensure that the quality is maintained.
Yeah.
But yeah, getting expert even for creating like small sample is harder.
Yeah, so in this study, in this experiment, we saw that a solution exists. Like you don't really need this much data set. We just saw that a
Yeah.
solution exists. How to go to the solution? We're trying to explore that. Like if you, I mean, it will be really great if we can provide without using expert, using the same crowd work, without providing some kind of feedback and autofix, able to do that. But yeah, we have not been able to do that so far. We're doing the experiment right now, and we'll see how it goes.
Okay, thanks. Anybody have any other question? You can unmute and ask. Anyone? Okay, so I don't think so. There's questions, but thanks, Saru, for giving this talk, and let's do a virtual clap. We cannot do physical clap, and I miss that. But anyway, so thanks for giving this talk and giving insight on why quality of data matter. How can we measure it? How can we create a good quality data, and what are the challenges associated? So thanks for this talk, and I hope people like this and maybe look at the data set creation as a respectable and good job and why it matters
Yeah.
instead of just updating the models with more parameters and better uh, more parameters or more data, feeding more data. So thanks for this wonderful talk and nice having you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, bye everyone.